Okay. Yeah, welcome folks. Welcome to our Tuesday night meeting of the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition. So this is, my name is Tiff. I use they and them pronouns. I am a member of the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition. Really glad to be in this space with folks. I come to this meeting as much as I can. I am one of the coordinating team members for the coalition. Along with Matios, and I'm glad to be here talking a little bit more about some of the things that we have going on. So this is our first Tuesday of the month meeting, which means we are talking about policing through the lens of gender and sexuality. And we will go ahead and get into, actually, before we get into the agenda, we can, I think, start with just doing some check-ins with folks, if that's okay. And maybe what we can do is we can just go around and share our name, pronouns, and I'm thinking a lot about self-care this week. So maybe what is our favorite way to give self-care to ourselves, or what is a way that we plan to create self-care for ourselves this week. Hope that's not too complex, but I can start that off. So yeah, again, Tiff, they, them pronouns, and I plan to give myself more time to rest this week. For me, that means taking naps sometimes if I need them, and not just kind of pushing through and like tackling whatever thing needed to be done on my laptop, which there's always something. And I would just love to open it up to anyone that would like to go next.
I will. Hi, everyone. My name is Monique Noel, and I'm with the Downtown Women's Action Coalition. Pronouns she, her, hers. And yeah, thank you for that, Tiff. I think it's important that we do kind of share the ways that we self-care and encourage ourselves and others to do that. I know for myself, I've not been so great on taking the time to self-care, particularly when there's a lot of things going on. So for me, I'm thinking, as the question was asked, what would be a good way for me to, in this moment, self-care? And I think it's just being silent, being still, and taking some time just to kind of quiet the noise in my mind and around me, and just actually being still, being calm, and being quiet, because I don't give myself enough time to do that. Always on the go, always into something, always, I just sit still. So yeah, that's how I'm going to be taking care of myself this evening.
Tasha, looks like you're about to go. You about to go? Okay. Hey folks, my name is Matios. I use he, him pronouns. Also with the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition as a coordinating team member, but I'm also staff there. And I know, Shamika, you just hopped in. The question is, how are we practicing self-care this upcoming week, or what do we do to practice self-care? And for me, I feel like one of my primary outlets, even for like, emotional catharsis, and even just like to regulate my well-being, it's like the only space I kind of zone out in a clear way is when I work out. So it's just really making time and allowing time to do that. And I know that seems like rigorous work, but it really is just like an opportunity for me to not think. And so I thrive from having that space. So just being more proactive about just even letting myself go for a 20-minute run or something like that. So yeah, that's how I plan on practicing self-care this week. Yeah, and I'll just leave it for anybody else to pick up.
Okay. Hi, my name is Natasha. Smith. I'm with LA Can, and my pronouns are she, her, they, them, we, us, our, I, me. You know. How do I self care? I think that what I want to do is take the time to take a bubble bath and listen to a nice audio book of like healing mantras, just repeating to myself, I am divine, I am beautiful, and nice hot bubble bath with a fan blowing in the bathroom. When I take my hot baths, I have to have the fan blowing and a cold drink on the side. That's how I self care. And I'm going to pass it to somebody. I'm going to pass it to Isabella.
Let me unmute myself. So I'm gonna do all of those things. I'm gonna be silent. I am gonna take a bath, but I'm also gonna be reading a book. I love to read. And it's a time where I just don't think about anything and think about a story. So yeah, and it's gonna be a fiction book. I just got it at the bookstore today. So that's me. How about KK?
Hey, hi, thank you. I am Kiki. My pronouns are she, they. As long you can call me whatever, just as long as it's respectful. And I'm with LA Can DWAC, and something that I'm going to be doing to do self-care for myself. I think I'm going to focus on some I'm a poet, so I do poetry. So I'm gonna focus on writing some more poems, and also working on some of my projects that I have on for myself. I have a lot of stuff going on, like under the umbrellas of other people, and I think like I just need to take a step back and do some projects that I want to do that mean something to me, without like this kind of like, you have to do this or it has to be a certain type of way for us to like, fund it. I just want to get into some projects that are just for me. And I think that'll help for my self-care. And I'm going to pass it to Ryan.
Thanks, Kiki. I'm Ryan. I use he, him pronouns. And for self-care, I'm definitely a reader as well. So I like doing that, like on my couch with like a cup of tea and whatnot. So I was just doing that earlier, probably going to do it again tonight, but yeah. Is there anyone else? Oh, yeah. Cindy, I'll popcorn it too.
Cool. It looks like Cindy dropped it in the chat. Cindy uses she, her pronouns. And for self-care, they say, I want to take more time to do art to help de-stress myself. No problem, Cindy. No one has to unmute. Folks are always welcome to drop in the chat if they feel like it.
Okay, I think I can go. My name's Lucy. My pronouns, I use any pronouns. And for self-care, I kind of like to just set time aside for myself and just do whatever I need to do in the moment, like just rest or sometimes read, kind of like what you guys all mentioned.
Hey everybody, my name is Ray, and I go by he, him pronouns. Self-care. This may sound counterintuitive, but for me in this moment in my life, self-care is actually caring for other people and feeling that my life is meaningful, and just giving for those who are in need at the moment when pretty much, if it's spontaneous, which that happened today. There was somebody who his father died, and so I was there just to listen and to empathize with him and see if I could and just be with him and have a conversation with him. So, in giving, I receive, and so that's an expression of self-care for me. But in order for me to do that, I meditate. So I do some meditation and try to detach from the world, from the cares of the world, and get back. Try to reach a transcendent spirituality. So, and it works. So that's kind of my source of energy for giving to others. Okay.
I think you're muted. There you go.
Okay. I guess I'll go. My name is Mika. I am with LACAN, DWAC, Food and Wellness Collaborative, Vegan for the Soul, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. And for self-care, I am going to start doing more affirmations for myself. And also, I'm a big reader as well. I haven't read in a while, and I do have this book called Your Body Believes Every Word You Say that I really want to get into. So I'm going to do that as well.
Okay, folks, and I think Nikki, I believe maybe the only person who hasn't gone yet. Nikki, I'm not sure if you feel comfortable. I know you called in just a few minutes ago. We were just going around and sharing our name, pronouns, and how are we, what is our favorite way to engage in self-care, or how do we plan to engage in self-care this week?
Yeah, hi everyone. Sorry, yeah, I wasn't sure who else still needed to go. Happy to be the last one. My name is Nikki. I use they and she pronouns. Recently, how I've been engaging in self-care is finding good music, just like moving my body, and just like, yeah, vibing to good music with cool people.
Awesome. That's great. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing, folks. That was actually a lot of really good ideas in there, and a lot of a lot of good thoughts. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. And yeah, so after that, I think we can go ahead and just go through what are we going to be talking about today. So looking at the agenda, we did have 3 different things on the agenda today. I think we're going to start out first, though, by, and I'll just say what those are, but I think we'll start out first by getting an update on a DCFS report that is going to be coming out soon. Then after that, we'll go into some additional topics. We'll be looking at a recent article, just kind of talking about a recent article that came out that folks may or may not have seen. It's to do with how students are being surveilled in schools. So not a new topic, but we'll talk about why is the article talking about it now? It's talking about like online surveillance and ways that people are being tracked. So we'll take a look at what that article is talking about. Then we will also take a look at one of the community tools that the coalition published in 2017 that we have been kind of planning to update. It's looking at actually like the history of domestic violence and sexual assault within LAPD. So that's something that we launched published in 2017. We have been kind of thinking about revisiting it. So we'll talk about that. And again, like why now? And then lastly, we can touch on in another one of our working groups, we have been looking at the way that LAPD is policing areas using what it calls SARA reports or SARA locations. We can talk a little bit more about what that is. The reason that we wanted to update folks on that here is because we've just been getting some information about where specifically LAPD is targeting with those. And we'd be super interested in if folks are interested in like looking at, are these areas that folks are familiar with? Like, for instance, we got information back from Central Division, from Hollenbeck as well. So just taking a look at, are these locations that people are familiar with or perhaps live around and would be interested in kind of talking with us more about that. So that is how we will round it out. We're not planning on it being a super long meeting. So we'll just kind of see how we go and would just really love to hear from folks. So that's our agenda. And any questions or thoughts before we get started? Okay, Matios, I think I'm going to hand it over to you now.
Yeah, thanks so much, Tiff. Yeah, and I'm really excited about this upcoming conversation. As folks know, Tuesday's conversation is where we look at policing through the lens of gender and sexuality. And, you know, we often think of the LAPD when we think of that patriarchal violence. But a lot of that violence is also couched in different city agencies or county agencies. And today we're going to revisit a report that the coalition had dropped in 2020 on the Department of Child and Family Services, which is a county agency that deals with child and family services, what's in the name. And to the uninitiated and uninformed, it may seem like a benevolent force within the city. But, you know, through an abolitionist lens, we know that the state has an adversarial relationship with us. It has a target on Black bodies. And so, you know, this agency is going to be no exception to that rule. And so we're going to talk about how mothers specifically are targeted and criminalized through these programs, and primarily Black mothers, right? Let's keep it real. I think one of the things we do know about the DCFS, and this was a big topic of discussion with the County Board of Supervisors in 2020, was that while Black Angelenos only make up 9% of the county's population, they make up about 30% of DCFS cases, removals. So that disproportionality is largely due to anti-Blackness, to different perceptions in Black behavior, demonization of Black behavior. So we're going to touch on a little bit about all that, and I'm going to show some parts of that report that we dropped in 2020. But before we do all that, I want to welcome and thank the Downtown Women's Action Coalition. For those of you that don't know, the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition is housed within the Los Angeles Community Action Network in Skid Row. And the women, the femmes that have been leading the fight in uplifting the femmes in Skid Row have been the Downtown Women's Action Coalition under the leadership of Monique and everybody present, Shamika, Kiki, Tasha, of course. So I'm just really, really, really thrilled to have y'all here. Really excited to hear from you all. And I just want to hand it off to anybody to talk about the work that y'all do. And yeah, just introduce yourselves, really. And anyone can grab. Oh yeah, there you go.
Okay, I'll go first. Yeah, as Matteo said, we're based in Skid Row, and we are made up now primarily of women in the community, unhoused women in the community. There are organizations in Skid Row that support and connect with us, a number of different collaborations. But for the most part, it's made up of women who are living and working in Skid Row. And so much of our work is centered around wellness, actually, what we need to be well, what we need to feel safe and to be well, and not just surviving, but actually living, you know, good, decent lives. And we know that just living in this area that's so hyper policed and so violent, just the state violence that is within our communities is, you know, comparable to nothing else. We know that we have to be there for one another. We know that we have to have and imagine ways that we can kind of protect, support one another, and just creating safe spaces. And so because as women in society anyway, we're dealing with systems of oppression, patriarchy, all of these things that are so violent and just aimed specifically at women. In an area like this, that's massively ignored, massively abandoned, massively neglected, women's voices are even more muted, you know, than what happens anyway in other parts of society. So we just feel it really necessary to do the work that we're doing. So what we do is engage and work with folk in the community, women in community, really examining what our needs are, what the things we need to be well. And so we do a lot of policy work. We do reports to support trying to influence policies and legislation that come in and directly affect us. We do work around healing and wellness. We also do a lot of work around just responding to folks' needs. And so we know that women kind of don't have access to hygiene kits and clothing and other things like that. And so we kind of make sure that we work around trying to meet some of those needs. The report that Mateos mentioned felt really important to us to get involved with and to collaborate on, because with much of the work that we do, this is one of the number one things that women have to deal with, that women have. I'm trying to think of some of the words that I hear from mothers around here, but it feels like death when your children are snatched from you and your family is destroyed and interfered with, and the ways that the state and state agencies interfere with families, particularly Black families. So this just felt absolutely an obvious collaboration to work with Stop LAPD Spying on this report. So I'm not going to be the only voice that's talking here, because we have other members and mothers here too that can speak to why they felt it relevant to kind of get involved with this report. But yeah, there's a lot of great work. I just want to thank all my sisters that are here today that really kind of push that work forward and inspire me actually to want to be part of this movement and this work. So I'll hand it over to others to say a few words.
Okay, I'll say something to that. With this child welfare thing, I have been personally a part of that in my past with my children, and it's almost like you can't do anything as far as like when you're in need of help or some type of assistance or anything like that. I remember being in a union rescue mission with my children and having DCSS called on me, and it was just nothing. It was absolutely nothing. And when the police arrived, they just laughed at the situation and left. That's how ridiculous it was. They hide behind the mandated reporter thing that they have to call, and that's not true. If you see something that needs to be called on or whatever, you know, talk to, at least have this was when I was in a union rescue mission. So this is a facility. This is something where I believe it personally that there should be something set up where you're talking to the parents, maybe a counseling session, maybe a therapy session, maybe something like that. It's just criminalizing being a mother because you are in their facility or you're in need of some type of assistance. It's always like that, and I've seen it time and time and time again, over and over. Kids are being taken. It's like, it's saddening and it's sickening to see just how it's done, just so much. Like it doesn't make any sense. And like I said, it's like criminalizing a mother for being a mother, like for being a mother in need, you know, and it's just, it's saddening. And so, yeah, I just wanted to say that about the DCFS and the child welfare.
Hi everyone, my name is Natasha. So what I'm going to do is just run through a few of the facts that we gathered from the report. So like the violence of family separation, punishment, and surveillance used by the family policing system is built within and from a long legacy of colonialism, anti-Blackness, and genocide in this country. And the funneling of families into the system has continued to be a way for those in power to displace community members from their homes and to rob them of opportunity to create and sustain future community and familiar bonds. Further, those in power have intended to deprive communities of the ability to move freely and autonomously in society by using expansive surveillance tactics within the system. For many of the DWAC mothers, the surveillance is like being under the eyes of Big Brother. Also, something to remember is the broken window policing and the criminalizing of mothers. Um, using the same using the broken window logic, they attempt to connect visible signs of crime and civil disorder with future crime. And so they have researchers who have tried to connect child maltreatment rates to what they consider disorderly neighborhoods. And the system creates false narratives about mothers to maintain false claims of child protection. The family policing system has found ways to convince society, including the families of those impacted by the system, that they are saving children from something harmful. This harm is often associated with Black mothers and mothers of color who are labeled, demonized, and criminalized by the system based on made up narratives that were created by the system itself. Also, okay, also is human trafficking and kidnapping. When you talk about DCFS, across the country, there remains a multitude of stories that describe the harm caused by family policing, and several which come from Los Angeles.
Yeah, thank you, mommy.
For me, in my experience with the DCFS, I mean, when they took my daughter from me, it was one of the hardest things that I had to deal with. I had to jump on the horse that they wanted me to ride. They made me take all these classes. They made me take drug tests, and they had my daughter for 3 months, and they had her. It was the saddest thing was to go visit her in a place where they called it like a family visiting zone. And I had to sit there and visit with my daughter, and she was like all ashy and her hair was all messed up and her clothes looked funny. And all I wanted to do was just take her home and change her and give her a bath and love her and hug her. And just walking away from her every day, every time I went to visit, was like the hardest thing. And she didn't understand it. And so that's the main thing with the children, is that they don't understand what's happening. All they do is they feel like they're being punished because they're being removed from everything that they know, everybody that they know. And then if they have siblings, most of the time they're separated, and so they be with strangers, and it's hard to adapt to that, you know, and be able to deal with your emotions and understand what you're going through emotionally when you're with a stranger who probably doesn't really care too much, you know, about what you're going through, basically wants you to just do what they say. So I mean, I'm happy to say that I did jump through all the hoops and I did get my daughter out of foster care, but it was one of the hardest things that I've ever done. And one of the things that I'm most proud of, to be able to say that I saved her from that. I saved her from that system. I saved her from having to go from foster home to foster home to foster home to possibly being adopted, you know, so. I can go on and on and on, but I'll just stop right there.
Hey, I'm Kiki again, and I just wanted to speak a little bit to the to the whole thing about the mandated reporting and stuff like that. And I'm speaking as someone who like went through the system, who was a foster care child, who was taken away from my mom for a little bit, who was consistently questioned and talked to every single time, like DCFS was called for something. And one thing that I noticed, like growing up and going through those situations, is that the social workers seem to be, in my eyes, in my particular situation, only mandated or only mandate reporting when it came to the biological parent, especially in minority cases. But when it came to blatant things that were happening inside of these foster care homes that we were placed in by the social workers, there was no mandate reporting. There was blatant abuse being allowed and being laughed at and being neglected. And I just think that when we get to that portion of the meeting, I'm going to be talking about like accountability and solutions that we could implement like in the here and now that will help like I was going to say destructure, but I can't think of the word, like these things that we have in place, because we all know that this system is built to disproportionately cycle minority groups in to either be workers or to be in jail, which is still to be workers, you know what I mean? So I think that we like have to like pay attention to like they caused the problem and then they criminalize the problem and then they create the cycle by taking the child and then they do it again and again, right? Because the system that they're taking you from something that might be a hardship and putting you into a system that can absolutely destroy you, and they do nothing about that. But then like if your mom is like, hey, we have to make spaghetti for 2 nights and that's what you got to eat, they're like DCFS, and it's like, wait a minute, like, you know what I'm saying? But like, I'm getting fully assaulted and abused and neglected over here and you do nothing about that. So I think that like it is all like a cycle. It's to create more ways for the police to keep a job, because the police don't really need to be a thing. Like they don't. They're creating scenarios for themselves to be the good guy, which we all know they're not. Like they're creating instances for them to have to do something. And in order for them to keep doing that, they rely on this cycle of the foster care system and of criminalization of minority communities. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, Kiki. That was spot on. And I want to thank everybody who shared. I want to recognize how heavy it is to recount that trauma and those experiences. And I thank you so much. I value your presence here and you recounting your experiences. And I want to open it up to questions. But before I do, one thing that stuck with me about what Mika said about, a mother not having resources and being criminalized for that. And what Tasha read from our forthcoming report, which hasn't been released yet. It's been done in collaboration with our incredible coalition partner, Victoria. But is this notion of like broken windows policing being an aspect of how they target and criminalize these mothers, these families? And if we remember what we know about broken windows policing, it really is just a targeting of poverty, right? It's a targeting of like a lack of resources. And so if we juxtapose that, and I'm going to share a screen real quick against just how much money is spent on DCFS and these, we're hearing all this conversation about these mothers that are criminalized for lacking resources. We see all these nonprofit organizations that work in tandem with DCFS, and look at the millions they get, to separate families and to put children in what Kiki was describing as abusive institutions. And you can read this full report in that link I dropped in the chat, but this is an agency that receives over $2.3 billion in funding. And if the objective, like, like he was saying, if the objective was truly to help families, was truly to take care of children, a sliver of this would make a world of a difference in Black families all across LA County. But instead it's used to criminalize folks. And so I just wanted to highlight that it is a racket, and we can show some other parts of the report, but before we do that, I do want to open it up to any questions if folks have questions for our DWAC fam. Tiff, I see you dropped, when will the report be released? Sooner than 4 to 6 weeks. I know that's usually the line we give when we've got one coming, but this one's like, we're nearly there. So be on the lookout. We'll talk about it some more. Yeah. And so if there aren't any questions, I think we've talked a bit about how, DCFS directly criminalizes families, and directly enacts these acts of violence against families. But another way we kind of see that pop up is, and this is something the coalition talks about a lot, and this is just a portion of it, but many folks might have seen the coalition's information sharing environment, just that web of databases that ties local agencies to fusion centers, to state agencies, to federal agencies, and has your information in 100 different places, right? And so what we kind of highlight is that this type of information sharing facilitates the criminalization of an individual, but more often than not is designed to facilitate the criminalization of specific communities. We're talking about Black communities, brown communities, poor communities. And so we have a list, here information, or I'm sorry, agencies with which DCFS reporting information is shared with. And so you'll see like Department of Social Services over here. You'll see the Department of Mental Health for LA agencies. And then you've got nonprofits who have access to all this too, First 508. And then you even have private entities, which I know is cut off, but Amazon, like companies that can commodify this data, also have access to this information along with federal agencies. So it's really just teeing people up, setting people up, in this case, mothers, children, for incarceration and criminalization down the line. Yeah, so, and this was made by another coalition partner, Rumshaw, they crafted, they helped craft that larger report that I dropped in the chat that we released in 2020. I'm just going to pause if folks have any comments or insights or any connections they're making with their own experiences. But we can also check out some other stuff in this report real quick. And just, just looking at these numbers again and the sheer commodification of, our trauma, our mother's traumas, like, what's really, I guess, like just even seeing this last line right here is really stuck with me. Exactly, yeah, how they determine the cost of adoption. That's exactly what I was going to point out, where Black babies cost $18,000 to adopt, biracial children cost $24,000, and white babies cost $35,000. It's just really gross and telling. And then on this last slide here, we've just got some, Rumsha was able to get some testimony from some social workers And I just want to read some of these, or actually, yeah, if anyone, I don't know, feels inclined to read some of these out loud, or we can just read them to ourselves. This is some testimony that Rumsha got from social workers and former social workers at DCFS.
If I may, I'd actually like to make a comment on that, because I think like that's like a really important statement. About we need to understand the abuse, neglect, and harm are understood differently across cultures, says a former DCFS worker. And I just want to bring just a little bit, and not clarification, but just a little bit of like insight to that statement. As far as like, I remember one time getting told at school that my hair wasn't done because I wanted to try a natural afro for the first time instead of having like the braids in that I would normally have, or have it like slick back with all this stuff. I seen something, and my mom, Mika is my mother, can attest to this, but you know, I wanted to try rocking a natural afro because I was like, oh snap, I seen somebody like probably on TV, and I was like, I can actually do that. And so I wanted to wear my natural hair out, and got told by my school, by like teachers and principals and counselors and stuff, that like was questioned, like, is your mom doing your hair? Are you okay at home? And it's never enough for the child to just say, yes, I'm fine as well. I think that's the other thing that we have to like take a deep dive into, is that like the issue is pressed, and children are easily like swayed, right? So if I'm like, your hair looks like, it's not supposed to be like that, are you okay? And you're like, no, it's fine. And you're like, you're sure your mother isn't making you do that? You're like, no, it's fine. You're like, you can tell me anything. And they're like, okay, like, you know what I mean? It's going to press some type of issue. And I think that like one of the main things that we have been called, had DCFS called on us before, was about things that were culturally significant. Like, I don't wash my hair every single day as a Black person, right? Like, that's not something that we do. But culturally, that's different than a non-Black person, right? Some people wash their hair every single time they get into the shower. So if I don't wash my hair for 3 days, and you think my mom isn't taking care of me, and then you call DCFS, and then I get put into foster care, even if it's just for a week, that's still, you're actually putting the trauma that was never actually ever inflicted. And so we have to take culture into consideration when making these decisions. And I feel like, and oftentimes the position of power are not, people in positions of power are not culturally diverse or culturally fluent enough to make those decisions based on their own personal, they haven't had those experiences. They don't know what it's like to have coarse 4C hair, so they don't know how it's supposed to be taken care of, and in their eyes they wouldn't do it that way. And it's also it's really a form of white supremacy, if we're being honest. It's like, well, I do this and so should you. Well, I don't care what your culture is, I do it this way, so if you're not doing it that way, then we have to force you and acclimate you to how we behave. So I just wanted to highlight that point.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go
Sorry.
ahead.
Yeah, no, I agree 100% with what you just said, Kiki. Another thing that's just is so disturbing to me and so sickening to me is the ways that the state encourages other agencies and individuals and civilians to report those very same things. Anything that they see that doesn't look right to them, which, as you say, has been looked at through a white supremacist, through a very Eurocentric lens. And so, of course, all of the time we are going to look abnormal. I'm talking about as a Black family. We're going to be triggering all of these alarms and all of these things just because of our Blackness, just for being ourselves. And that's really how we're being, you know, penalized and punished and criminalized and surveilled in these disgusting ways. So thank you so much for lifting that.
I just wanted to say, and one of the big things that stands out to me is how much money they're willing to invest into all of these other organizations helping to take care of the children. But when it comes to the family, they don't want to give them nothing. Like even the women on welfare don't even receive as much money as a foster parent does. And that's crazy that they're willing to pay a stranger thousands of dollars to take care of your child, but they won't help you with giving you at least $1,000. I know parents who have like 4 and 5 children that don't get $1,000 off of welfare. So that's just something else that we need to look at and figure out, like how we can take those funds from those organizations and give it to the families, and maybe the society would be better and we wouldn't have so many foster children. Right now there's too many children in foster care who don't have a place to go, who did have a place to go, who now don't have a place to go. And there's too many parents, especially mothers, wandering around here looking crazy, lost and confused because their children have been removed from them and they feel like failures and they feel like they can't even do that one thing, and that's take care of a baby, you know. So back to you, Matios.
Thank you, Tasha. That was potent. And, you know, I feel like you and Kiki said something similar here. And I think this needs to be verbalized because it doesn't occur to a lot of folks. You know, Tasha, you said these children that had a place to go, but no longer have a place to go. And Kiki, I remember you had said, in effect, the first instance of trauma was when they reported, you know, that very happy child who differs from, you know, culturally differs from these people who were meant to uphold these Eurocentric white supremacist standards. They didn't encounter a single trauma until they engaged with DCFS, like this agency that's meant to help. And so I think that's something that needs to be named to kind of get rid of this veil of benevolence on this agency. It's explicitly overtly harmful, as we've heard time and time again. So I'm just really glad y'all have lifted that. It's 6:52. I know some of the DWAC folks have got to go at 7, and I want to be respectful of y'all's time. I want to invite folks to ask questions if y'all have any, or if any of the DWAC folks have anything else y'all want to bring up or talk about in regards to this prior report. Like I said, we've got another one coming real soon in partnership with our family at LA Can. Or also if DWAC wants to talk about anything else y'all have been working on, anything you have coming up. But before that, I just want to open it up to questions or comments.
I have a question. This is just, it's such great information and such important information. And I'm really looking forward. Thank you so much for talking about this and working on it and sharing it with us this evening and sharing your experiences as well. I'm just wondering, I'm really looking forward to when this does come out and being able to share that with folks and read through it in more detail. When it does come out, you know, we know that when, such as with reports like this, when they have such great information, are there, like, is it going to, I'm just wondering what format that's going to be in. Like, is it going to be, is it just going to be like a printed report? Will this be able to be found online? I'm just thinking about, like, you know, being able to share it with folks easily.
Yeah, it's going to be printed and available online as well. Yeah.
Awesome. And then I know at the coalition, I'm sure we will be having many conversations about, like, the contents of it and what we're learning as well, and with you all as well, to be continuing to have those conversations about what we're learning from it and what are the implications.
Totally. I think, yeah, this is going to be such a powerful, important tool for folks that are experiencing this violence. And, you know, yeah, as with anything, the coalition of DWAC or whomever puts out, I think it's meant to help folks to build power. And I think that's what it's going to do. And as far as mediums, I'm glad you asked that question, Tiff, just because, you know, not everybody wants to read a report. And I know we've got Kiki and Tasha, two incredible artists. So I'm really curious about ways we can make this more accessible and yeah, we interpret, you know, anything we do. We should have been plugged in with you both.
First I want to say I'd be totally down to like find some artistic ways to express the reports and stuff like that and be able to get it to more people. That would be so awesome. I just wanted to say one final thing. Well, I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
Yeah, thanks, Rick, nephew. That's right.
Oh, I think it's been.
Hey, yeah, I just wanted to my final statement. That sounds weird. I'm not in court, but this is my final statement. I just wanted to leave with something that I feel like we can do in the mean and in between time, because as far as like what you like, we can go out and we can tell others this, our friends, our family and stuff like that. If you do happen to see someone or a child that you may think is in need and is in help, one of my favorite sayings is it takes a village, right? So you may see a mother in need and you may see a child that may not be getting all of their needs met. But I would implore you to not immediately call in these power structures, right? Because I will tell you, 99% of the time I've ever seen DCFS come out, they've come out with the police, which is extraordinarily harmful. Because it's already gonna be a traumatic and high gut-wrenching thing, high energy thing for someone to be told that their kids are getting taken away from them. And to add in, you know, police who we know do not know how to de-escalate situations into that high stress environment is extraordinarily harmful. So I would implore to like, just if you see a situation and you're like, maybe that mom needs help feeding her child. Not everyone can always give money or buy food or something like that, but there are resources. There are places that give away free food. There are places you can refer, instead of bringing in these power structures that we know tear away families. And maybe if that mom was able to go to some resources she didn't know was there, then that family can stick together and then they get the help that they also need. And then boom, that problem is fixed without tearing a family apart. So that's just the last thing I want to say.
I just want to echo what Kiki was saying about if you see somebody in need or if they need some help. I think the best thing to do is, if you see something, just go and approach the mom and just inquire. Hey, how you doing? I see that you look like you may be going through something. I'm in a position to help in this way. Would that be helpful to you? Instead of going and trying to get them arrested or get their children taken. I think that proactive approach is the best approach to see where you can help. Because obviously, if you're staring that long where you're creating concern inside of your body, that concern shouldn't lead to a violent and criminalized and traumatic experience for the next person, but it should come with relief. Even if it's temporary or long-term, it should have relief and not tragedy or trauma. So it was nice talking to you guys. I hope to talk more.
I just love that it should come with relief and not trauma. Man, I need to do something with those words, because that's, yeah, thank you.
Hello, can you guys hear me? Yes, okay. As a person myself who was somebody called DCFS, and I lost my child at 7, and I didn't get to see him until he was 20 years old. You know, if somebody had approached me and told me, hey, you know, you need help and can we help you, it would have been a lot different than having, you know, the police come take him away and then not seeing him. So as a former foster child myself, and as my child being in the foster system as well, I just want to thank you guys for, being active and having these kind of meetings, because it does really help. And like I said, as a former foster child and having my own child taken away, I'm very one of those that like ask, I, instead of just calling right away and saying, I'm going to call and get those entities involved, because lots of times those people are afraid to ask, or they don't have anybody to ask for help. Thank God, I got my help, and my child's back in my life, but I got him really way too late at the age of 20. I mean, I barely started getting a relationship with him. And I lost a whole bunch of time with him. And I just thank you for having these meetings. Thank you. I just wish I would have came a little bit early. I clocked in really late, but I see that you guys are recording, so thank God I could probably go back on the recordings. Thank you.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, everybody. I know folks have to go. Kiki, Tasha, Mika, Monique, thank you so much for plugging in. I really hope y'all come back. Y'all have just been a wealth of knowledge. And how can folks best support DWAC? How can folks plug in? Yeah. Y'all want to plug anything?
Yeah, connect with us. We're at LA Can 838 East 6th Street, but go to the website www.cangress.org, and you can find some of our reports there and some of our upcoming events. So yeah, just connect with us and support the work.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And y'all are welcome to stick around. But thank you again. I'll pass it back to you, Tiff.
Yeah, right on. Yeah, thank you so much, folks. Yeah, that was I'm really looking forward to reading more about that. Yeah, and we are still having a few more items on the agenda. I think okay, just letting the rest of us know that we're still yeah, so yeah, hi folks. And Karen, I think you mentioned wishing, I hope you may already be familiar with where the recordings are, which is on the Stop LAPD Spying website. Those can be found. I'm not sure what the special tab is, but I know it's a pretty good website that you can find things actually pretty easily, which has not always been true about the coalition website. But yeah, so I know that those are on our website, posted on YouTube as well on our channel. So definitely take a look, and I'll probably do the same. But yeah, so it's just after 7. We had a few additional things that we wanted to just check in on, as we mentioned at the top of the meeting. And so the next thing we wanted to take a look at was an article that had come to our attention. So at the Stop LA's, thank you, just had to clear my throat. At the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition, something that we do very much is try to learn more about the ways that folks are being surveilled, the way that people are having their information gathered on them. Who is that impacting, and how? And the reason for that is not so we can be kind of, we say building power, not paranoia. We're not trying to be getting more paranoid about all the different ways that we're being tracked and stalked, but we are trying to learn more about it because we want to be pushing back on it. We want to be informing each other about what's going on. And how this is going on, as we saw in that great diagram, like how is this information being shared? Because a lot of this doesn't make sense, but it's just that we're unaware of it. So we're not always able to push back on it when we're not aware that it's even going on. So we're looking now at an article that this was on, I think it's from Wired in August. And this is talking about, Matias, are you able to share the link to that as well, like in the chat, perhaps? I should also be able to do that. Thank you. But essentially, so this is an article that is looking at, it talks about a few different types of surveillance of students. Thank you. And one of them in particular is called Gaggle, which I need to learn more about. There's a number of different programs that are named in that article, but a lot of them kind of do the same type of thing. And that is that it's software that is essentially installed on the devices of students. These are devices that more frequently have been issued to students during the pandemic, and since then, like my kids now, one is in middle school, one is in high school. They both have school issued devices. I think it is very common. So a lot of these do have some kind of spyware or software installed on them. It's something that wasn't done right away, but it has become increasingly popular. And this type of software, like all types of surveillance, is also kind of changing and evolving in terms of all of the different things that it is being designed to do and all the different ways that it is being used. So initially, and also I would love to hear from folks. I'm not sure if we have folks here as well who may be teachers or who may have family members who are teachers or with kids in school. And also this type of software, I'm sure, is also used in some workplaces and used in kind of different places as well. But would love to hear from folks who, have their own experiences of this as well. But essentially, yeah, it kind of started out with, oh, we want to be able to see the student's screen to make sure that they're actually following the lesson. And we want to have access to their chat so that we can see what they're talking about. And that's kind of how it started. And from there, it has grown into things like scanning keywords for certain phrases and doing like a threat assessment. And what else? I know that with Gaggle, I think Gaggle is the software where they've actually found now that, as you can see in the picture, this is software that actually is able to connect to a phone. So if a student has even their own phone and they take their laptop home, the school's laptop home, and they're charging their phone through the laptop, Gaggle on the laptop is able to connect to their phone and get all of those messages as well. And in some cases, the way schools have it set up is that notifications are sent to different departments at the school, or even to different agencies outside of the school to be notified about certain things. Again, this is all like under the guise of like, responding to alerts or threat assessments, this kind of thing. And I'll just say one more thing and then I'll pause. And Matos, I know that you have also taken a look at this, and I think had pulled out some key things that you wanted to share as well, or at least show. But just one more thing I'll say is that there's also been instances of students being outed, LGBTQIA students actually being outed due to the nature of what was in their messages or their texts. And I know from, that type of thing has happened at my kids' school as well, in terms of like, teachers will sometimes look at the searches that a kid has been performing online and then share that information without checking with the student. They will share that information just directly with their parent. And that kind of thing, yes, can lead to things like a student being outed, information being shared with a parent that they wouldn't wanted to have been shared. So it's obviously very dangerous in many different types of ways. And I'll pause and see. Well, before asking yourself, Matthias, folks, is anyone familiar with this type of software, I guess, or perhaps come across this in their own like line of work, or perhaps if you have a family member in school? Okay, Matthias, do you want to, I don't remember this. Was this in the article? Do you want to tell us what we're looking at?
Yeah, so the article kind of kicks off by talking about the interface for Go Guardian, which is one of those apps they use to monitor students' computers. And so I thought it'd be cool to just look at what they were talking about instead of a description. So yeah, I guess the educator or whomever has a dashboard like this that has each student's screen, so you got searches over here, you got a kid listening to One Direction, um, all manner of stuff, just to give folks a sense of what this looks like. And then I also just pulled a couple excerpts that I thought were pretty gross from the article, that I can show right now, if that's cool. Sure. Okay, cool. So yeah, one of these was that 40% of teachers reported that at least one student at their school has been contacted by law enforcement as a result of behaviors flagged by the monitoring software, which is pretty concerning, right? Like, we're worried about surveillance technologies being used to criminalize youth, and here we have proof of that. But I think furthermore, 37% of teachers who say their school uses activity monitoring outside of regular hours report that such alerts are directed to a third party focused on public safety. And so just kind of thinking, reframing like the relationship of educators as mandated reporters, as like individuals who facilitate the criminalization of certain youth. Right? We know who we mean by certain youth. It's youth that usually don't abide by the white supremacist homogenized concept of like what is to be like right. And so we know that their computers are being monitored after school hours, right? And that reports from these computers are given straight to law enforcement, you know, almost ensuring that these kids, and by extension their families, have encounters with law enforcement that'll likely lead to criminalization or worse. And then the other aspect here is immigration enforcement, which is like, I can't think of a rationalization apart from, you're trying to separate families or just pure xenophobia or racism for that to be an agency to which, student computer usage is reported to. Yeah, and I'm gonna pause here if folks have any comments or questions. Next slide is what Tiff was talking about, the students being outed. And so we have here, one high school newspaper reported that the district used monitoring software to reveal student sexuality and out the student to their parents. And, I think Tiff was going to touch on this a little bit later, but, we know that we've seen an increase in legislation criminalizing our trans communities. And we've seen this rise in Christofascism, this real enforcement of heteronormativity. And this is something we can anticipate, surveillance technologies like this are something we can anticipate the state to use to criminalize, our siblings, our trans queer siblings. And so we're seeing that more and more. And so, yeah, that's just something I wanted to highlight from this article that I thought was pretty jarring. Yeah, I don't know if folks have any more comments or questions about any of that, or if folks have seen or experienced anything like this.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking that I would imagine that this exact, and again, I like prior to this meeting, I didn't look up each of these different types of software to learn more about it, but I would imagine that this same type of thing would be used in the workplace. Like I know that recently, just thinking too about how like LAPD recently got funding for a grant. It was a grant, or it was software to do with monitoring workplace violence. And I bet it's very much like this kind of thing where it's tracking keywords. And then the purpose is to be like what they call increasing their situational awareness, which is how this type of software markets itself as well, to be kind of preventing those, so-called threats from happening, or catching them, as they just in the everyday communications. So yeah, so I would imagine that it very much transfers over to the workplace as well. Although I haven't heard of that as much. I just remembered that LAPD was using a software that was specifically looking at workplace violence. Yeah, and it would also be interesting to know more about what is used like at LAUSD. Like my kids go to school in Temple City. TCUSD is their school district. So we haven't had something to this degree installed on their devices as far as I know so far, but I'm sure that this kind of thing is going to be increasingly popular. Yeah. And then, as you said, Matios, yes, thinking about how this would be used in those states where, for instance, abortion has been criminalized, and even getting information about reproductive health and birth control, how that is being criminalized, how being trans is criminalized. So yeah, it would be interesting to learn more about that as well.
Yeah, and another thing I've been thinking about as of late is how, due to the efforts of organizations like Students Deserve here in LA, like we have successfully gotten school police off campuses at LAUSD schools, but we see this consistent push by the police to make their presence in schools felt. Like in a lot of cases, that's like surveillance technologies like this that give them an entry point into students' lives and their homes. And in the War on Youth, we talk a lot about the PATH program, which stands for Providing Alternatives to Hinder Extremism, which deputizes teachers, mental health workers, social workers to look for risk factors for extremism, facilitating criminalization and ensuring, cops get into campuses or just into the lives of youth. And so that's another thing we kind of wanted to talk about was, the LAPD's, and maybe this is where we're going. Is this where we're going? Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Is the LAPD's consistent push to be in youth spaces, whether it's through CSP, which is a community safety partnership and programs there, or through deputization like this. But we have a timeline here that kind of highlights what happens when a violent racist police force is around youth, which is that they're violent. And so this is a timeline of abuses by the LAPD that we have up on our website. That was, I think, the most recent entries from 2015, if I'm not mistaken. But folks can check this out, and I'll just leave it up on the screen and scan through some of the other pages. It's gross, but this is what the LAPD does.
Yeah, and I hadn't actually been thinking about it in terms of making that connection, because this timeline that we are looking at, it essentially charts out. This was created in 2017 when there was a scandal in 77th Division over cadets who had borrowed and crashed police cars, and it was also exposed at that time that one of the cops there at 77th had established a relationship with one of the cadets and had been sexually abusing and raping her, essentially. And so that was exposed, and at the time it was very much treated like, oh, this is shocking, like this bad cop was treated like a one-off, when really what we know is that there's this extensive history going back to like pretty much as long as cops have existed, right, or youth programs, but going way back, especially at LAPD and at police departments around the state as well, of this type of abuse. And so, yeah, you're right, Matios. Like I had been thinking of it in terms of this culture of patriarchal abuse and control and domination that is just persistent in policing, in the police and in policing spaces. But also, yes, like we do, like it's the insertion of police into community spaces, into youth programs, into all of these places so that they can be also getting information. You know, we know that's what DARE was about. DARE was about getting information from kids about their families, about, you know, what was going on at home. So it's about like inserting themselves into all of these spaces. And so we see that with the youth programs, with the cadet programs. We see that when they put police in schools. And then we're also seeing that with their community safety partnership program, which is the policing of, that's right, Pancake, that's right, shut them down. That's right. And yeah, so community safety partnerships is putting cops in housing complexes, predominantly Black and brown housing complexes, and in parks, and kind of taking over these spaces and essentially making them like substations for LAPD, which of course ends up displacing folks, criminalizing folks, having folks have their kids taken away. And so, yeah, so this, when we go through and do this kind of research that we've done with this type of abuse that has gone on in the past, and then also is going on currently, it is really to demonstrate that this is part of their culture, and that this is not something that can be kind of extracted from policing. It's not something that can be reformed. It's something that they actually will protect, and that they will, you know, continue to deny is going on. They will continue to minimize. Yeah, so that was the purpose of the timeline that we created at that time, which, as you said, Mateo said, goes up to, I think, yeah, 2017, because that's when we actually released it. I'll pause and see if anyone has any questions. Yeah, it is pretty jarring. I'll just echo what folks are saying in the chat. Like, it is pretty jarring. I think because they so successfully are able to keep this stuff secret. And so, yeah, and so we did want to let folks know about this like community tool that exists, this timeline. We are thinking about doing some work. We have been doing some work to update this, to kind of bring it up to present day, because this is abuse that keeps going on, that is continuing, and that we do want to be continuing to draw attention to, and also seeking to learn more about, again, how we can be supporting folks who are impacted by this. So it's not just a matter of calling it out, but it's also like understanding more about like, how does this happen and what is it that folks need? Ray, I think I see your hand up. Please go ahead.
Yes, I'd be curious to see what the punishment is throughout the time period of this report. And, you know, maybe that would be something to look into a little bit more. Obviously, police officers get punished less, or at least that's what I'm looking, where there are reports for where they're punished. I'm looking at some pretty mild sentencing. It's pretty amazing how little time they spend in jail, maybe prison, maybe not prison. So I'd be curious to see that. Of course, there is this cycle of I guess for certain crimes like statutory rape, there's this historical trajectory where in times past reporting and prosecution is less than it is today. So to take into account this kind of secular trend when looking at these kinds of reports would be something to look into. Anyway, so that's all I've got. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, that was something that we did consistently note. That was one of the things we called out in this report. And then also it's something that we're continuing to see in incidents that have happened since then. And that is, again, just like the minimization of it, and that people are not, police are not, I nearly said held accountable, but that does not exist. But there is not like, there isn't a punishment or some kind of consequence. Sometimes there will be a lawsuit for the person, which gives a remarkably small amount of money to the person who was harmed, who then has to deal with that trauma for many years. And then, something that was interesting. So in looking at, because since this report was done, they now have to release more records about like when a complaint is filed against a police officer for sexual assault, I think, that has to be shared online. So there is a place on the LAPD website where you can actually start to go and get more information about it. And a term, and so what you see in there is you see a description of what happened, and then you also see the back and forth between the higher ups kind of saying like, oh, how bad was this? And what is the amount of days off that this person should have? And that is pretty shocking. And what a term that I learned through looking at that was, God, what is it? Military endorsement. So in a number of cases, suspension, so there'd be like a recommended suspension. So like in some cases it was in a number of cases it was a cop who actually took advantage of a woman who had been abused and came to them for help, knowing that they were a police officer. There are 2 cases where the cop then took advantage of that person. And in, I think, one of those cases, they said, well, this person has been a cop for nearly 25 years. So they call that giving them a military endorsement, and then they reduce the sentence because they're like, well, you've been a cop for so long, that's it, like you've served like a certain amount of time. So we'll reduce the amount of days that you're suspended, which is pretty astonishing. So that was, I think, one of the findings. And then also just surprised at, I guess not surprising, that this really does happen across all divisions. Like it happens with senior lead officers, with vice cops who are working with sex workers, with DARE cops, with internal affairs cops, just across all divisions. You see this happening, which I guess it shouldn't be surprising. And then also another trend that we see is police using their access to surveillance and access to information, systems of information, to leverage something over a person or to track a person or stalk them. So that's some of the additional work that we've been doing looking at this. And so I don't know if anyone is interested in joining us in that, but we certainly could use the extra research help on that. But also, we're also just interested to hear what folks' thoughts are on it as well. And it's probably it's something that we'll keep probably looking to folks to get more thoughts and feedback on our analysis as we go along. Did you have anything on that, Matios, or did that, I think, cover? Okay. All right, now it is, I mean, we're pretty much close to wrapping up. I can just mention one more thing that we had on the agenda, and I'll just mention it at this point. And that is that we do invite folks to work with us in a working group that we have over in our fight against data-driven policing. So in that fight, we have a group that looks at location-based policing by LAPD, and the way that LAPD selects an area to police and then comes up with a plan on it, like a tactical plan of how they're going to police that area. It's called a SARA plan. They have actual SARA reports that go along with that. We did file a PRA a while ago, and we're starting to get results back from that. We're very interested to hear from folks who perhaps are familiar with the areas that we're seeing on these maps and in these documents, or for anyone who is perhaps interested in just looking at those with us. Pancake, we did get Central Division back, so we know where in Central Division, where in downtown LA, LAPD was targeting with these locations. Like in 2020, we know that LA Can actually was within one of these Sarah locations. And we have that documentation as to how LAPD and the entities working with LAPD were looking to police that area. So yes, we're very much interested. If anybody would like to look at those with us, we would love the additional help. And but yeah, that was pretty much it. So any questions from folks on all of that?
I also just wanted to plug that next week's webinar will be on the fight against the war on youth. We'll announce more details later on this week. And if folks are in the LA area and you want to come hang out with the coalition or come meet some of us, we're housed in the Los Angeles Community Action Network in Skid Row, and we have a resident organizing committee, which is our Skid Row community meeting, open to everybody on Friday at 5 o'clock. So y'all are welcome to roll through. We'll be there. Pancake will be there. And yeah, it's a good time. There's always music and food we talk about. And we'll be honoring Indigenous Peoples Day this week. So we'll be talking.
Awesome. Any other community announcements that folks would like to make? All right. Well, thank you so much for joining with us, and have a great evening. Thanks, folks.
Thanks, Tiff. Bye, everybody.
All right. Bye.